This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. It's great to have you with us. If you haven't already delved into Mike Sanderson in part 1, then it's definitely worth checking that out first. You'll get a real insight into how Mike became such a force in the Maxi world and a leader in the offshore world. He's a great talker, so be sure to give that a listen first. Perhaps best known for his commanding Volvo Ocean Race win, skippering ABN AMRO in 2005 and 6, Mike, or Moose as he's known to the sailing world, in this part talks about how that campaign was shaped and just why it was so successful. We start things off at the beginning of that Volvo campaign. Before we get started, if you're enjoying what you hear, then head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to use, and your support allows us to stay ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted pods. So a huge thanks for the coffees. It makes a real difference. Right, let's get on with it. Here he is. I hope you enjoy part 2 of the time I spent with Mike Sanderson.
We've shortlisted you to skipper ABN AMRO in the Volvo race. My life was all about winning the Volvo race as a skipper. ABN was an extension of us. We'd lived through every layer of laminate. We'd made all the decisions on how strong everything was going to be.
For the 2005 Volvo, you were skipper of ABN AMRO 1. I mean, how did all that come about?
Well, to be honest, it sort of all came about on the back of that Marisha time, because, you know, in that time, Emma and I were living together, and Emma had finished successfully, obviously, her around alone race. But there was a new wave of Amoca 60s coming, which were, you know, canting keels with ballast, big rigs, fragile rigs, really technical boats. And so we tried to do the Transat Jacques Vabre, but it was all a bit new and green, and we weren't really prepared properly. And then so we took our time, and we got ready for the 2004 Transat race, which is the old Ostar, from Plymouth to Boston. And so I decided to do that. I'm not sure why, because I'd actually never sailed solo, and I'd never even navigated in a race. And so, but we got Brad Jackson and Dave Endine and Matt Smeaton, who actually just walked past when we were doing this interview, and we got and Troy Tyndall, and Emma and I, and we got the Open 60 out of the shed in Gosport, and we trained and developed it for a few months, and then I did the Ostar race, the Transat race, and it was interesting. So just before that, with Andrew, we had announced that Emma and I were keen to do the Volvo race together. And again, I'm not actually sure how keen Emma was, but she knew I was very keen, and she knew Andrew was very keen. And anyway, I was on the dock in Plymouth, and Roy Heiner and Juan Kay walked down the dock and stopped and had a chat. I knew Roy because we were together at Oracle, and I hadn't met Juan, but I'd obviously heard all about him. And anyway, we had a long chat on the dock, and Roy said, "Oh yes, we've been following what you're doing in the 60, and we're following what you're doing in the Volvo, with the Volvo race team. But obviously, it's best for us if we get more teams. So let's just keep in touch." And I thought, well, that was interesting conversation, sort of a little bit left field. Anyway, I had a great Transat race. Mike Golding and I had some amazing tussles at the front, and I led for a good portion of the race, which was I didn't really know what I was doing up there, but anyway, it was fun. And managed to find Boston, so that was a relief. Finished third, got the fastest 24-hour run of the fleet, and I'm really proud of that result. It was a really cool race because we'd pushed the boat pretty hard from a development standpoint, and I think we probably had one of the fastest boats in the fleet, and that played into my strengths. But again, I was a Volvo sailor. I definitely pushed too hard when I shouldn't have, and broke too much stuff. But anyway, on arrival, literally champagne moment, hugging family bits and pieces, and Roy Heiner and Wayne Kay walked down the dock. I went, "What are you guys doing here, "Oh, well, we followed your race, and, it's really cool what you've done in the Mocha class, and, anyway, it was just, again, a bit of a bizarre conversation. Anyway, we wrapped up the boat. The shore crew got the boat ready to go back. Emma and I actually flew back to New Zealand, and the phone, we'd literally walked in the door in New Zealand, and a text pops up on my phone and goes, Roy goes, "Can you ring me?" So I ring him. Still, it's now like 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd landed at 5:30 from Boston on the Los Angeles flight, and Roy goes, "I need you to come to Amsterdam." I'm like, "Roy, I've just flown from Boston. You just landed. Can you tell me a bit more about it?" He goes, "Well, we've shortlisted you to skipper ABN AMRO in the Volvo race." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, wow. Of course I can come to Amsterdam." Anyway, so then I rang up my travel agent and said, I need to look at a ticket to Amsterdam. And she laughs and goes, "What's with Amsterdam today?" Going, "Hang on, let me get back to you on that." So ring Roy back and go, "Roy, are there other Kiwis coming to Amsterdam to this? What's going on here, He goes, "Yes, well, there's someone, the other option happens to actually be a Kiwi as well." And we don't need to go into names. But anyway, it said and I said, "Well, are we going to be on the same plane? That's going to be a bit awkward." No, he's the day earlier. So anyway, that was the rest history. I got up there and met with the board of ABN AMRO, and I was basically told then and there that I was going to get to skipper ABN, and we'd already given up on our plans for our own Volvo team. I think no one was more relieved than Emma. She, I don't think really had any great desire to sail around the world with me.
We should probably explain to our listeners who Emma is.
Yes.
Emma Sanderson, obviously Mike's wife.
Yes.
Scottish. So
yes.
Massive fan, and did great things in her own right in offshore sailing.
Absolutely, Emma Richards. When Alan MacArthur was winning things in the 50-foot class and the 60-foot class, Emma was really doing very well in the 50-foot class, and she loves reminding Alex Thompson how often she beat him. When we catch up with Alex now. So it's her, and obviously, and then she did the Royal Sun Alliance, and those girls have had a lot of enjoyment in following Miranda Marin in her recent Vendée Globe, and Sam Davies, of course. So
she's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So no, Emma was pleased not to have to do it. But yeah, it was, and the ABN AMRO campaign was just an absolute dream, obviously.
How fantastic. A campaign that was well funded. It was 2 boats entered into the race.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you approached that campaign as skipper with ABN AMRO.
I mean, the ABN AMRO campaign was so special because, the Dutch were just an absolute pleasure to work with, because one of our slogans was one clear goal. I mean, we were there to win the Volvo Ocean Race, and there was no excuse. We had 2 boats, we had a great budget, we could do what we like, we had no nationality requirement, we had no excuse. So that adds a lot of pressure, because I was very well aware of, their football culture, if you like. And the first guy to go if you're underachieving is the coach. And, there's nothing closer to a coach than the skipper of a Volvo boat. So, no, it was an amazing opportunity. And, but lesson learned from my time with Doltz and Larry Ellison and Robert Miller and Jeff DeTivo and all the people, who had played such an important part of my career to date. Emma and I managed to just really decide what was going to be important, and we just decided that we had to get the very best people that we could convince to come with us and be a part of that. And I look back now, and we obviously Roy Heiner set an amazing platform for us to be able to go and do our best work. And our relationship with 1K and with his office, and he was this young up and coming designer who was unbelievably talented, and I had a couple of Monties early on. In one of the meetings I said, yep, love the 1K boat, love the idea, but should our second boat be a Far boat? Because Far had dominated the race for the previous 15 years or whatever it was. And I
mean, it was Far. Obviously, part of the gig really was to go with 1K, One Commission.
Yeah.
And the boat looked, really different.
Yes.
Incredible, but different. Did
Yeah.
you feel it was, perhaps, a bit too much of a risk?
Well, so when I was employed, the white boat, so our first boat, was very much underway from a design standpoint. But the black boat was totally, the boat which we raced, the boat that we were always going to race, was totally our baby. So if we'd really thrown a spanner in the works, and hadn't been able to work with Far, it wasn't too late for that. And, we had a lot of, again, we had no excuses. So if it had been a deal breaker, we could have done what we liked. But to be honest, as soon as we spent time with one, we did, we were able to get such a strong team. Mark Christensen, who joined us, and he'd won the previous 2 races with EF and then with Ilbrook, and he brought to us. Previously we've spoken about taking the race to the next level, and for sure. EF did that a little bit. Ilbrook certainly did it. And so the attention to detail with the boat build and every aspect of it. And so the black ABN AMRO boat, Black Betty as we nicknamed it, we certainly left absolutely no stone unturned on that boat, and its weight and its finesse and its attention to detail. And it's still, I think that was a nice evolutionary step, in the Volvo cycle. And, Mark played a big part of that. Obviously, Stan Honey, getting the opportunity to sail with Stan. That was a really interesting conversation. So Ben Wright, who was our shore manager, he'd sailed with him on PlayStation. And, Stan at that stage was really famous for the Transpac race, and, he turned 50 before the start of the race. But as soon as I, met with Stan and we chatted. I mean, we became dear friends. It was an absolute privilege to sit beside him around the world. And he used to, some of the things he used to say to, he could lose me in about 3 or 4 seconds on his analysis of the weather. But he'd start every conversation on the weather with, as you know, Mike, the upper clouds are doing this and and I'm just like, Stan, you don't need to start. I don't know what you're talking about. But he'd still do it next time. He was such a lovely, lovely gentleman. And I look back at the ABN AMRO campaign. I mean, we had a wonderful crew on the boat. We had a wonderful shore crew. We had, the sponsors were unbelievable and we wanted of nothing. But we worked very hard for them, and it was just a very, very special time of my life. And it's still, emotional looking back on it now. Obviously my life was all about winning the Volvo race as a skipper. And, we had this emotional roller coaster around the world of knowing that we were riding this wave of points gathering and momentum and race wins. But at that stage, if we'd crashed and burnt out, you're still gone. And then obviously we had the absolute tragedy of losing Hans Horowitz off the white boat when we were going across the Atlantic on what was a brutal leg. I mean, it was, at one stage we got down to VMG running downwind with 3 reefs in the main and a little storm staysail up just to try and slow the thing down. We'd lost Hans. We'd been involved in that, in all aspects of that search and things. I mean, obviously we were part of the same team, yet we weren't able to sail back to be of any help. We were too far in front. So we sailed into Portsmouth knowing that Movistar had sank, that the guys from Movistar were on board ABN AMRO 2, the white boat, with Hans's body in the bow. Was just a brutal, brutal time. And it's still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was a very emotional time, and we'll never forget it, that's for sure.
ABN AMRO 2 was, as you say, it was your second boat, but it was filled, wasn't it, with young, emerging sailing talent. What went wrong in that leg? I mean, as you say, a brutal leg from New York to Portsmouth. What happened?
I honestly don't think anything happened that couldn't have happened to any of us. The fact of the matter is, they were sailing into very strong breeze, and the breeze had built quickly on them, and they were into a rotation of guys going down to get harnesses on and life jackets on. And Hans was the oldest one of them, and he had been one of their coaches, in fact, in the selection process. And so I have no doubt, like we all hold our kids' hands going across the road, that he would have made sure that he was one of the last to go down to get a harness and life jacket on, just because. And so he was literally sitting on the sail stack holding the Jenica sheet as they're going downwind, and he got caught by a wave and swept over the side. So it's a very, it was a freak accident, and the timing was split second. He was maybe only a minute, or we'll never know, from going down and getting his life jacket on. So just a horrific time. And it just couldn't have been worse. The guys did an unbelievable job getting back to him. And they recovered the body, and which must have been just the most terrible time, and now that I'm, at the time, obviously, at the time, I still had my guys in conditions deteriorating quickly, and so the breeze was building, the sea state was really nasty as the North Atlantic can only be really at times, and so we had I had a lot on just getting our guys through safely, and I wasn't a father at that stage, so if you like, my world was inside that hull. I had to get them. So, but man, you could see the fathers on my boat were instantly in a whole different space, because Hans, had little Bobby ashore, and you could just, they were instantly in trouble, basically, and so it was a really, really brutal time, and for Sydney and Brad and Mark and for the dads of our team, that was a very, very long few days while we sailed the boat in, and it's since then, and being a father shortly after that, a couple of years after that, I often think about that, how tough that must have been on those guys.
Did Hans's death change how you approach the sport?
I always kept that in my mind, whether it would be, whether it would change, how I treated the race and how we sailed the boat and boats and things. We were very risk averse in the ABN AMRO team. We obviously sailed and pushed the boats very hard, but we were very quick into our life jackets, and we had, Volvo have always led the charge on safety and safety in the race, and we always had cutting edge equipment and things. So we were already doing everything that we could, really, and you can't ever be in that gear 24/7, and it was just a very, very unfortunate accident. After Portsmouth, I did always wonder whether I would be able to go back and push a Volvo boat in the middle of the night at 30 plus knots and sail it the same. And the reality is, you can, and you do, and you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to win. But also, it's you're doing everything you can to be safe, and you trust the people around you are too. And our sport has done a great job in getting safer and safer as the boats have got faster and faster. So the risk probably isn't changing that much, but it certainly would have if the equipment hadn't kept up. Again, you just got to look at these guys in these America's Cup boats. I don't think it was, because of how much safety equipment and how well they were protected and things. I think it's gone back to not being that dangerous now. Its most dangerous period is when the boats were emerging to become that fast, and we hadn't kept up. So, to answer your question, I think we were already doing a lot, we were as safe as we could be.
I remember an interview I filmed with you not long after that, I guess at the start of the next Volvo perhaps, and you talked about skipper responsibility and how much responsibility in a crewed offshore you have as a skipper. How important is that, and how much of a responsibility is it, leading a team of people around the planet?
It is a lot of responsibility, and I probably almost felt it more in the Sanya race, than I did in the ABN race, because in the Sanya race we had a lot more children involved. We were all older as a crew, and we weren't as well prepared. We hadn't had nearly as much time, and we were in someone else's boat, and it didn't feel, and I probably wasn't exuding the same confidence in any part of it. So it was, and quite rightfully so. The thing was unreliable, and we weren't able to finish legs, and it was kept breaking, and so you suddenly start to doubt a little bit, whether it's the safest place to have everyone, which was a very different feeling, because ABN AMRO was an extension of us. We'd made all those decisions. And I'm always a bit defensive when people say, oh yeah, you guys won the race because you had a fast boat. That's just such a load of rubbish. We created that thing. And it's interesting, again, not to keep coming back to last week, but someone even said to me last week, oh, imagine if they're in even boats. It's the most irrelevant conversation, because those guys have worked for 3 years to create that thing. If they want to go, and my response was, good luck to them. They can get in a 49er and go and race them then if they want even boats. That's what ABN was to us. ABN was an extension of us. We'd lived through every layer of laminate. We'd made all the decisions on how strong everything was going to be. So we had confidence. I think if you lose confidence in your hardware, then it suddenly starts weighing pretty heavily. And I definitely had that mostly on Sanya, and I was pretty keen when that was all over. Everything that worked for me offshore racing, I had the firm belief would probably work in the boardroom. Just even in the last 2 or 3 years, we've got new words and phrases which we didn't even know about.
Well, we haven't talked about the win on ABN AMRO.
No.
We've got a leapfrog along. I mean, goodness, you dominated that race, Mike. Looking back, how good did all that feel, and why did it all come together?
It's just a people thing, we were smart enough to, not be threatened by hiring anyone that, was, going to potentially take my job or do a better job, or we had great people, we were given a great opportunity, and we got on really well, and we were lucky, but yet we created some good luck, and it was an amazing time in our life, in all of our lives, and although so many of the team have gone on to do such great things, I know for many of us, it's been quite a big one, so to speak. It was a very cool time. We'd been brave with the design of the boat. We'd given lots of people an opportunity. The guys like Rob Greenhouse and even Stan Honey and things. So we hadn't always gone down the tried and trodden path, and I guess mainly with 1K, but that's amazing relationships were formed there, and it was a very, very special time.
It was a huge win in the sport, and I guess you were really noticed in the sailing world as a leader in your own right. I mean, someone who could deliver not only on the racetrack but also for sponsors. But also, you won under that cloud of losing hands. I mean, just talk to me about that moment. How life-changing was it, but yet how hard was it?
Yeah, it was. It was. Over a period of 5 days, we sailed into Portsmouth, or 7 days. We sailed into Portsmouth, having won the whole race. So by winning that leg, we were now unbeatable in the race. So there was a massive high of and guilt of knowing that we were achieving for all of us that lifelong goal, but we'd lost a teammate on the other boat. And so that was unbelievably brutal to sort of deal with emotionally. Emma and I we got married in that stopover. So, we had 140 people on the lawn at the Royal Yacht Squadron, organised by my Marisha owner. So we had this beautiful wedding, after a tough decision to carry on to do that, even though Hans's death. And then we got up at 6 o'clock in the morning after our wedding day and flew on a chartered flight to Hans's funeral in Holland. So we literally woke up in the tower in the Royal Yacht Squadron and jumped on a bus with all the guys and we're off to the airport to Hans's funeral. Then we came back, put the boat in the water way later than we ever had before after the stopover, and we went out what turned out to be my 35th birthday and won the import race in Portsmouth. And it just sort of went on and on. And this was all inside a week. So we'd won the Volvo race, my life dream. I'd come up with some cheesy one-liner when we hit the dock, which is still painted on the wall at the Volvo office.
You can say it once more.
No, I don't think I can,
It was your Olympic medal,
yeah,
your Everest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was my, this is my childhood dream, my Olympic medal, my gold medal, my climbing a mountain, and it was, it really was, and that was luckily off the cuff. It was, but it shows how, I guess, emotions were right on the edge. I was probably closer to bursting into tears than anyone will ever know, because of the Hans situation. It was really brutal, and it was just really it's that week will be for, and not a week in my life has gone on since when I haven't thought about it at some stage. So that sort of gives a pretty good idea. Here we are 15 years later or whatever long it is. And yeah, not a week would have gone by where it wouldn't have crossed my mind.
As you said, Mike, you went on to skipper. Sanya, you went back for, what was, I guess, your final Volvo, unless you go back again. Yeah, and that was a fraught campaign, I guess, all on its own. How much now do you miss being part of that, being part of the whole Volvo family?
Yeah, I do miss it, and but I'm very lucky to be part of other families because of my Volvo time. There's so many parts. I have my Bellamente family. I have my own family, obviously, with horses and boats and, all the craziness which we have going on with the 3 kids. But then I have the Bellamente family and I have the Comanche family, and I've got, there's so many other parts, and then I'm so fortunate with the super yacht project which I'm involved with, and it's very lucky. We're unbelievably lucky with the people who we get to hang out with and get to sail with, and how we get to welcomed into these people's lives and help guide them and be a part of getting them around the racetrack and stuff. It's such a privilege. So I do miss the Volvo thing. To be honest though, I always loved the part of trying to make the boats go fast. And so when the Volvo went one design, that wasn't, although there was enough small parts of that which I'm sure would have excited me, that wasn't really my deal. Don't get me wrong, I thought the race did it for the right reasons, and I loved watching it. It just wasn't really my cup of tea. But I still get to do what I love in developing boats going fast in the programs that I'm racing with. I still get the opportunity with the teams, which is what I love, and the interaction with, helping create these teams. And, I've, with my, now joint ownership of Doyle Sales, we've, all the bits which I used to love about the Volvo team, I've got in spades with the Sail company. And, so all the interaction with people, the hiring of good people, the getting, the stronger team than your opposition, the development of making boats go faster, all that stuff now I get to do all day, every day. And so it's not all bad. It maybe I'm actually not as far away from it as people think, if that makes sense.
It's a big step, isn't it, for someone who spent a career in wet Foley to move into the boardroom. I mean, you're CEO of Doyle Sales. I mean, it's not a move that works for everyone. Yet your energy, it seems, Mike, has really led to Doyle Sales to have a real presence in the industry. What's been your philosophy there? Talk to us about that.
Well, I think, everything that worked for me, offshore racing and racing in general, I had the firm belief would probably work in the boardroom. I think, if you hire good people and you give them enough trust I see my role no different to if I'm skippering a boat, that if you can provide the platform and the hardware and the tools and the group of people to create their magic, then whether it's a yacht race or out there in the commercial world, then the same rules kind of apply. And I think if we look at what's important, relationships with people is probably the number one importance. How you deal with things when they're going badly, it's dealing with things when they're going well is easy. We all know that. We all know when when we've won the pin and it's gone left and we've tacked and crossed, that's the easiest time to decide when to tack, right? But when you've been shut at the committee boat or you've been boxed out at the pin or something, that's when, I'm sure, like me, you've had your hardest decisions to make. Okay, how am I going to turn this back into a top 10 or something? And those are the same things which we have in business decisions. Okay, how am I going to turn this clanger into something where this client, this person is going to go from something which maybe we've done wrong, maybe they've done wrong, whatever, we're going to turn this into a positive positive situation for them and their belief in Doyle Sales. And I just think it's just a people's game. They both are, and that's how we're treating it. And it's the only game we know, so we'll keep doing it.
A lot of responsibility. I mean, more than 12 guys on a boat.
Yeah. Yes, we've got we're over 100 just here in New Zealand, and it's a bit over 500 globally and things. So it is a lot of responsibility, and I'm definitely still at the helm of that ship, so to speak. People look for the guidance and how we're going to, what direction we're going to take and things, but it's fun. We've got good people, and fast sailors make fast sails, And so, I've gone out and we've made sure that, the first thing we were going to do, it was like, it was really no different to picking the Volvo crew. Let's make sure the people that we get are nice people, and we'd want to go and have a beer or a glass of wine with them, and we'd want to go racing with them. And, at the end of the day, all Doyle sales people need to be able to go and stand beside or sit beside or race with a well-off or a fortunate enough person that's going to be in a position to buy sails, and they need to be able to make their boat go faster, even with the sails that they've got, and they need to be pleasant, and for that person to enjoy their experience more than they did without them there. And if I would like to think that everyone who we have in our organisation at the high end is capable of that, and more. So that makes it cool.
What do you think the future is of the sail industry? I mean, where's it going with sales and design? What are we going to see?
I think the sail making is still there's still so much fun stuff to do. Going to work is still it's still fun. I've been doing it now since that day of leaving school, and I mean, at the end of the day, we just live and breathe for making boats go faster and for the sails to be easier to use, and believe it or not, more cost effective. We're in this battle, in pricing against our dear friends, but also, we're in a race against making them more sustainable and more eco-friendly, and we're up against COVID shipping issues, and so there's plenty of bad shifts which we've had to deal with, but you've just got to look at how quickly so many wind-related sports are developing, between wind foiling, wing foiling, dual element sails, structured luff and cableless. I mean, just even in the last 2 or 3 years, we've got new words and phrases which we didn't even know about. So, if I think back to my early days, when we had the first 3DL sail here, that we thought, well, nothing this big is ever going to come along again. It's pretty much continued to do so since. And who knows where it's going to end up. I mean, what did those guys do? 50.2 knots and 11.6 knots of wind the other day or something. So, I mean, I don't know where that's going to end up, So, yeah, the sails are going to have to keep up. I mean, I think it's huge that the America's Cup went away from wings to sails, not only because we make sails, but it's just I think that was a genius stroke on the fact that it's much easier for people to relate to a yacht having sails than it is to a craft with a wing, and so I think that was a really good move. As I said, not just because I make sails, but just when if the boats had only been capable of doing 50 knots with a wing, well, that would have been a very different story, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. And the double skin mainsail, I mean, the sailmaker's dream. Really.
Yeah.
Two for the...
One for the price of two, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, really very little trickle down, from the double skin main, except one thing I keep telling people is, in every America's Cup cycle, the tools and our understanding and our knowledge of what's propelling the boat advances drastically. So you could argue what sort of trickle down we're going to get from the double skin mainsail, but there is no doubt we'll get massive trickle down from the development of the tools through this cup cycle. So it's all very relevant.
Mike, when you look back on all you've done, what are your proudest moments? What do you see, I guess, as your greatest achievement?
It's a little bit of a funny one, but our day of that World Sailor of the Year trophy, it was voted by your peers, and I think that's that was it was on the back of the ABN AMRO campaign, which I loved. I loved the fact that the ABN AMRO campaign was on the back of me doing this crazy solo transatlantic race. I love the solo transat race was on the back of the Mari Shah. And so, I guess if I'm brutally honest, one of the things I'm most proud of is being brave enough to leave school when I thought it was right, and to go and do a trade, and learn the art of sailmaking, and being a believer that was my road to professional sailing, and that was my road to winning the Volvo race, the Whitbread race, as a skipper, and I'm probably most proud of sticking to my game plan, I guess. I really didn't deviate too much off it, which now means I'm in this fortunate position to be married to my beautiful wife with my 3 lovely children, and to be back now sailing on these amazing boats because of what I've been privileged to do. And I've been sailing this Cherub, which you do have them in the UK, but it's originally a New Zealand class boat. It's 12-foot dinghy, and for my mates that listen to this will say he was always going to get the Cherub into this podcast, because it seems to have all been about the Cherub, but I was really looking for something to sail with my 11-year-old son, who was 10 when we started, and he wasn't loving what I call the Grand Prix dinghy route through the Opties and Bix and things, and he doesn't really like hiking or bailing, so an Optimist wasn't ever going to be a whale of a time for him. And so we tried all sorts of various dinghies, and we ended up with this Cherub, which is a single person trapeze. It was and a Cherub hadn't really been raced in New Zealand since 1988 or 1989. And so for 30 years, the class had been dormant here pretty much. And we found one during lockdown, an old boat, and did it up in the garage, and him and I started sailing it and started posting the odd videos up on Facebook and things, and it just went ballistic. It turns out that there was literally tens, if not hundreds, of people in similar situation in New Zealand that were looking for something high performance to sail with their kids, and anyway, it's just gone gangbusters. Anyway, Merrick and I were ripping down the harbour the other day, and he loves to chat. We one of the coolest things is we sit there just chatting away. I reckon we've almost got it up to 50% of the time being about sailing, but I'm probably exaggerating at that. We talk about everything: why a grenade is shaped the way it is, what sort of volcano, what the different types of volcano, anything. And it doesn't matter whether we're doing like 18, 19 knots bouncing from wave top to wave top, he still manages to talk about random things. But anyway, he said to me the other day, which was quite nice because it was about sailing as we're ripping down, when he goes, Dad, you've sailed on Pindar and Mari Shah and ABN AMRO and Comanche, but what's your coolest boat? And it suddenly went boom. It was quite a heartfelt, this is my 11-year-old ripping downwind. And I said, undisputable, getting to do this with you, as mushy as that sounds, is my dream, you know, and I mean that totally heartfelt. You know, having him trapezing beside me, us leaping down on this sunny afternoon in the harbour, sailing a high performance skiff with one of your kids was just magic. And so, you know, that's probably, you know, everything, if you like, it's done the full circle. I've managed to, you know, do what I wanted to do, and don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing in the towel, but you know, getting him out there loving sailing. He's young enough, so he still is. It's cool enough to do it with Dad, so I'm pretty lucky. And then to see him, you know, on Wednesday night, bad parent that I was, still had him in the Team New Zealand base, you know, at 1 o'clock in the morning. We were lucky enough to be inside, and just his engagement, you know, with Pete and Blair and Glenn Ashby, and all of which he knows now well, and dear friends, obviously, but he'd suddenly gone from this kid of 6 or 8 months ago, before he was into his cherub sailing, to now, you know, eye contact and just being, and that was an unbelievably proud parent moment for me. So God knows what I'm going to be like when I actually do something impressive. But yeah, that was a very cool moment.
That's very special, Mike. And I'm very pleased that you mentioned you actually go sailing, because we're recording this in your motorboat.
Yeah.
Our listeners might be able to hear the mooring lines tightening and
yes,
slackening.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we do. We tell people, though, that we cruise in a motorboat, in a powerboat, because we can fit so much stuff on it. In fact, my mother came on board to watch the America's Cup boat, and she said, I hardly recognise this boat, because whenever I see you cruising, you've got dinghies and wing surfers and wind foiling, and we're quite well known for loading it up with lots of paraphernalia when we go cruising. So no, we're what did someone describe? Active relaxers, I think, was the phrase that people used for us over the Christmas holiday. So
you got to have a boat full of toys.
Yeah, exactly.
Just lastly, Mike, I mean, looking back, what advice would you give the young Mike Sanderson, who left school early to pursue a career in the sailing industry? What would you say to him?
You know, it does sound cheesy, but I think, you know, you do have to follow your dreams, and you have to work much harder than you think you do for it. And, you know, it's all, you know, I've tried to give lots of other Mike Sandersons an opportunity along the way, and many have grasped it with two hands, but still the majority don't, you know, and that's always, you know, sad to see. And if you look, you know, again, you look at what those guys have achieved over at Team New Zealand, and you look at the hard workers that are in there, you know, they didn't stumble on that. They just worked harder than everyone else. And that's, you know, I think, you know, being the first one at the boat, being the one sponging the bilges out, being the one who offers to, you know, take the sails to the loft, just, you know, again, I'm going to use Richard Meacham as a fine example. Dick has just worked harder than everyone else, and now he's a multiple America's Cup winner, you know, in a very high-powered role at a pretty young age, and in one of the greatest sporting teams that's ever been around. I mean, it's just the most amazing example of it. He just worked hard. And so that would be my advice. You know, I think there's no substitute for it, you know, and yeah, just pin your ears back.
Mike, thank you. It's been so good to catch up.
No, lovely. Always a pleasure, Shirley. And no, fantastic. It's been amazing to have you here in New Zealand. I think you guys have done an amazing job with the TV coverage, and safe travels home.
Pin your ears back. Inspiring words from an inspiring man. Mike Sanderson, people, one of the real solid characters in our rich and wonderful sport. Mike, a big, big thanks for your time. Thank you. Well, you know we love to hear from you, so let me know what you think, like, review, subscribe on whatever platform you join us on. And go on, buy us a coffee if you've enjoyed the pod. It's easy, buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast, helping us bring you uninterrupted, ad-free chat from the leading lights in the sport of sailing. Tim at Vertigo Films actually makes these pods the lovely things that they are, editing and producing each one with love and care. So as usual, a big thanks to Tim. In fact, Tim and I are about to head to the Olympics in Tokyo to cover the sailing for the BBC. We're not really sure what to expect, but feel strongly, actually really compelled to do an outstanding job for all the sailors out there competing. I obviously love the Olympics. This will be my 8th on the bounce, 4 competing and 4 broadcasting. And despite this one's weirdness, remember this when you're watching telly. Every athlete there has devoted their whole life for this Olympic moment. To them and the people around them, it means everything. I can only imagine what this year of uncertainty has been like, trying to prepare with minimal regatta time. And all that the last 18 months has thrown, well, to all of us. And sailing's Olympic athletes get very little coverage. So cheer them on, get off the sofa and applaud them. Support your national sailors, support your national sailing team. And let's hope for some amazing racing out on the waters of Enoshima. It's hard to know if we will be able to do anything for the podcast whilst we're there. It could all be very tricky, but we'll do our best. You know that. Keep in touch via social media. If you're watching the Olympic sailing on TV, let us know. I'm Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, Shirley Robertson on Facebook. I'll try and post details on what's on when. Let us know if you're watching. It's always great to hear from you. Until next time, thank you so much for listening and have fun on the water. Sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.